This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Let me ask you a question. What makes a good organization when it comes to a football team? What comes to your mind when I say that this team is a good organization? Obviously, a lot of people will default to wins. But every team that wins a bunch of games isn't a good organization. See, I think the conversation for what a good organization is a bit more nuanced than just looking at the win-loss records, because there are teams that win games every once in a while that aren't good organizations. There are teams that lose games every once in a while that aren't bad organizations. There are teams that win trades that aren't great organizations, right? The Chicago Bears are a great example of this. They're a team that won a trade tremendously with the Carolina Panthers. Got their first round pick. All they had to give up was the opportunity to draft Bryce Young. I think they're happy with that choice. And I'm to tell me if I'm going out on a limb there. But all they had to do was give up that opportunity. They have a first round pick. But do we believe Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears are a good organization because they made that one good move? No, because they traded a second round pick for Chase Claypool. Ultimately, that makes you kind of skeptical of if they are a good organization. See, a good organization isn't a team that hits on every draft pick. A good organization to me isn't a team that hits a home run on every trade. A good organization to me isn't a team that hits on every trade. Like, they don't have to hit 100% to be a good organization. A good organization is a team that can withstand some blows. A team that where something can go wrong in a season and the ship is still in a relatively standard direction. A good organization is a stable one, is one where you don't have to worry about if the wind blows too hard, it goes away. Good example. If somebody has the tallest structure on the block, right? And you look up and you like, oh my goodness, look at that structure that they have on the block. It's so impressive. It's so cool. And then the wind blows and you realize that that structure is just a house of cards. And it just all comes falling down. It's a mess. It's all over everybody's driveway. It's all over everybody's lawn. Can't nobody pick up the pieces. Everybody's irritated. And it turns out that that wasn't a great structure. This is a great moment for a bunch of cards. A great organization is like a brick house, a sturdy brick house. It can withstand a couple earthquakes, a couple tornadoes, all kind of natural disasters. It's brick buildings in New Orleans. It's brick buildings in Cleveland. It's brick buildings in New York that have been standing there since the 1800s. It's a good foundation. It's a good building. Might not be the most impressive building, might not be the most flashy building, but you know what? It stayed up. Stayed up a lot longer than some of these other flashier buildings. So I bring all that up because the topic for today is my belief that the Cleveland Browns have actually been a good organization. Because when you think about a good organization, you think about an organization that can accumulate talent. You think about an organization that can fix holes on the roster year to year, week to week, month to month. When you think of a good organization, you think of an organization that can develop talent and retain talent. When you look at a good organization, you look for an organization that can bounce back from a bad decision or two. And I think the Cleveland Browns fit all of that criteria. Now, let's start with the first thing that I mentioned, talent accumulation. The first thing you will hear when anybody talks about the Cleveland Browns is what? Man, that roster. Ooh, boy, that roster. They got such a good roster, right? It really started with John Dorsey. John Dorsey put the beginning pieces of getting a good roster here. He had a lot of extra first round picks to do it. And he got Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb with those extra first round picks to add on top of Myles Garrett, and certainly some of the tanking that the Cleveland Browns did in that time period before like 2017, 2016. Not tanking technically, but you know what it is. The losing that the Browns did, the 1-31ing that the Browns did during that era, definitely gave them draft picks to accumulate talent. And they definitely did accumulate a ton of talent in that time span, right? You talk about 2017, David Njoku, Myles Garrett in that draft class alone. You look at 2018, Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb. I mean, that's pretty much your core, right? Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb. That's your core of the team. David Njoku can be involved in that too if you want him to. And he's certainly been playing at that level the last couple of weeks. So that is part of it. Another part of it is making a trade, 5th round pick for Amari Cooper. Another part of it is picking up some pieces in free agency. Another part of it is draft picks that you use along the way. Another part of it is some of the guys that have been kind of incremental guys on other rosters that you started to develop that you got in free agency, like a Anthony Walker. And you start to see the talent accumulation of this team. And what's been impressive about the Browns, especially with Andrew Berry, in my opinion, is that he's accumulated this talent without being so fixated on it only being his draft picks. We mentioned the core of this roster are not Andrew Berry draft picks. Right? It's not like it's out the realm to believe that Andrew Berry would have picked these guys. I mean, like Denzel Ward at 4 was not a crazy pick at the time. Nick Chubb at 32, 33, not a crazy pick. Well, not even 33, my bad, 35. They picked Austin Corbett before they picked Nick Chubb. So Nick Chubb at 35, not a crazy pick at the time, but those were not Andrew Berry draft picks. But Andrew Berry was smart enough to not only keep those guys on the roster, obviously, but really work to extend and develop these guys. Nick Chubb, they already brought in Kareem Hunt when Dorsey was on his way out. That was a Dorsey pickup, Kareem Hunt, because that was who Dorsey drafted in Kansas City when he was over there. But you can argue that the Browns knew what to do with Kareem Hunt, with Nick Chubb, once they got Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. That's when the bulk of our Chubb and Hunt memories started, about 2020, 2021, 2022. That's when we got all those core memories of the Chubb and Hunt days. So taking somebody else's talent, figuring out a better plan, and utilizing them correctly. Denzel Ward is another great example of this. Denzel Ward was known as an inconsistent player, really good, but inconsistent player. You get him here in 2020, you start putting him in the right role. Okay, he has a really good 2020, but then he starts to falter a little bit because of Joe Woods and all the other stuff that you had around him. You fix that, you put Jim Schwartz in. Denzel Ward's had the best year of his career. Good job nurturing some elite talent that you had around him. Myles Garrett, I mean, it wasn't going to take a rocket scientist to draft Myles Garrett nor develop Myles Garrett. And I honestly don't feel comfortable giving the credit for developing Myles Garrett, a generational talent, to any one individual other than Myles Garrett. That was going to happen. Nobody gets credit for developing Myles Garrett. That was pretty developed. Right? We knew that dude the second he walked through the door, #1 overall pick. Nobody gets credit for that. But what you do get credit for is the development of David Njoku. Because if you remember, 2017, that wasn't a John Dorsey draft pick. 2017 was actually back in the days of Sashi Brown. That was a Sashi Brown pick. So David was drafted in 2017 by Sashi Brown. Like many Browns players, became a victim of GM overturn, right? They go to John Dorsey. He gets put in the doghouse almost immediately for whatever reason. Like after that 2018 season, 2019, David spends the whole 2019 season in the doghouse. Kevin comes, and it feels like David's going to be in that doghouse even deeper because the Browns signed Austin Hooper to do his job, essentially. But David keeps pecking along. Team notices, and they say, hey, let's develop David. They develop David into an excellent pass blocker because they hired guys like Bill Callahan to develop David Njoku in that blocking sense. David develops. He becomes such a better blocker. You're able to put him on the field more. And next thing you know, David starts to blossom. You're starting to see the fruits of that labor. And then David Njoku, this guy who looked like he was going to be a lost cause in 2019, after 2019, because he wanted to trade and everything, looked like he was going to be a lost cause. All of a sudden, gets an extension. Now we're looking around in 2023. He's one of the best football players on this team. That David Njoku is a player, an example of a player who the Browns would have missed out on and saw be great somewhere else, right? Remember that with the Cleveland Browns, where we would get rid of all of these players and then we would see them pop up other places, like when we got rid of TJ Ward or Tashawn Gibson or Jabal Sheard. You can name all of these really solid players that we had for a little while that we didn't know what to do with. We got rid of them. They went somewhere else. They were better. And we always sit here and we go, damn, why can't that be us? David Njoku is an important piece in all of this because that's one of the first examples of a player who would have slipped through the cracks of the old, badly run Cleveland Browns organization. He almost slipped through the cracks of the old, badly run Cleveland Browns organization. But now that the Browns have been a better and more well-ran organization since 2020, I would argue a good one, a guy like David Njoku doesn't slip through the cracks. You want to know who else would have been a prime slip through the cracks candidate with the old Browns? It's somebody who just got their extension on Sunday, Grant Delpit. See, Grant Delpit with the old Browns would have been traded or cut by year 3, and then we would have saw him blossom in probably New England. That's what the old Browns would do. I am convinced, by the way, like this is just my being a Browns fan conspiracy theory for like 20 plus years. I'm convinced the downfall of New England 100% has something to do with the fact that the Browns aren't letting talent walk out like crazy anymore. Because like there was a time where most of New England's best players were like old Browns that we just gave up on, that Bill was like, hey, I'll take them on a discount. There was like that period of time. Like, it's no coincidence that the bottom has fallen off of New England and we're also not giving them players at the same rate. But that's just my conspiracy theory. But Grant Delpit is one of those guys. We would have lost to the Patriots, would have lost to the Ravens or somebody like that, and we would have been like, damn, we used to have, why couldn't we figure it out with Grant Delpit? Grant Delpit, similar story, right? 2020, tears his Achilles in training camp, can't play. 2021, doesn't really find a great fit in the Joe Woods defense. Same story in 2022 until the end, where you had so many injuries that you basically had to play Grant Delpit at linebacker because John Johnson went down, and you were like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. There's something there with Grant Delpit when he plays closer to the line of scrimmage. You get rid of Joe Woods, you bring in Jim Schwartz, and Jim Schwartz looks at that tape and goes, well, he's just going to do more of that. And then you just ask Grant Delpit to do more of that this season. He plays at an extremely high level. I mean, we haven't worried about a tight end all year. Next thing you know, you're starting to see it. A player that would have slipped through the cracks with the old, poorly run Cleveland Browns organization doesn't. Because this version of the Cleveland Browns, whether you like them or not, they're well ran. You can make the same argument with JOK. Back in the old days, that bad year JOK had last year, oh, they would have got rid of him after that. You know why they would have got rid of JOK? Not because somebody would give up on him, but because it's 2 years. He didn't play well in that second year. It's going to be a new coach with a new defensive coordinator, going to swap out everybody. And David Njoku and Grant Delpit and JOK end up becoming casualties of that. You just get rid of them. Guys like Taki, even like the small incremental pieces. Taki's another great example of a guy who didn't slip through the cracks and became a productive player for you, right? Late pick, a guy who couldn't figure it out at his original position. Then you move him to Sam linebacker. He has some success. Then you put him at Mike and you realize, oh, he's a pretty decent Mike. A guy who would have slipped through the cracks with the old Browns. For sure would have slipped through the cracks. Doesn't. One of the things you look at when you look at this Browns roster that's unique to people who paid attention to this team back in the dark days. And I'm not just talking about like, oh, when they went 1-31. That ain't really the dark days to me, because honestly, the 1-31 seasons weren't that bad. Like, you just knew they stunk. You knew what it was on Sunday. You watched it. And then you got it out. Them 2012 years, like them years where they made you think that they could go 500, those years where they would make you think that they're going to win 8 games just to lose out, like those were the years of pain and torture as a Cleveland. Every other year you're firing a coach. Those were the torture years. And those were the years where we would have let all these players slip through the cracks. And you remember when you were going through those years, we kept like 6 players. Like from 1999 to 2018. Well, 2018, yes. We might have kept 6 players for like a significant portion of time. We might have 6 legitimate alumni. Phil Dawson, Joe Thomas, Joe Bitonio, Joe Hayden, Josh Cribbs. You name me the 6th one. We had like that. That's how little alumni. DeQuell Jackson. You could throw DeQuell Jackson. He's a legitimate alumni, right? DeQuell Jackson. You had 6 legitimate alumni in the span of 17 years. Think about how many guys who are legitimate Browns alumni, like 2 contract everything Browns alumni since 2017. Yeah, David Njoku, got Myles Garrett, got Denzel Ward, got Sione Taki. You got what? Wyatt Teller, Pancake House. I already counted Joe Bitonio with the other one, but he's still on the team, so you can kind of count him here. That's already 6. You can even count Jack Conklin if you want, even though Jack Conklin's kind of not an alumni. He just never is healthy. Nick Chubb. You could flip it to the other side of the ball. I ain't even mentioned Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett. All these other guys like JOK eventually. Grant Delpit's another one. You see what I mean? So many more guys who have been on the team forever. You used to look at old Browns roster, you're like, maybe 3 of these dudes have been on the team for more than 3 years together. You look at this Browns roster, you're like, man, 10 of these guys have been on the same team for like 4 years. And it shows when you watch them play. It shows when you watch this team go through adversity. It shows when you watch this team deal with something because they know each other and they know that this organization has a plan. They trust the organization because the organization is well ran. And that's why they're able to persevere over negativity and just bad things happening. It's because the organization is well ran. It's talent accumulation. They've done that. I've made a thorough argument to say they've done that. I made a thorough argument in talent accumulation for talent development. I made an argument during talent development about talent retention. Boom. Right there. You thought I was making 1 point. I made 3 right in front of your face. 3 points right there. The Browns have accumulated talent. They've developed talent. They've retained talent. You don't believe me about the developing talent? Did you watch the Browns on Sunday? You see that guy who had 2 interceptions, 3rd round pick, Martin Emerson. Just stepping in, 2nd year. Stepping in at corner. Denzel Ward's gone. Hey, man, if Joe Hayden missed the game in 2010, it was a wrap. We had Buster Screen out there trying to guard dudes. Like, nah, it was a wrap. It was a wrap. We ain't had nobody. We ain't had no number 2, let alone number 3. Now, Denzel Ward, one of the best cover corners in all of football, misses a game. And we sitting here like, hey, man, as long as we have our 5th round rookie, Cam Mitchell, we going to be fine. And guess what? We were. That's the more insane part. The confidence is backed up by what the team does. We were fine. It didn't matter that Denzel Ward's not out there. We got Cam Mitchell, Martin Emerson, and Greg Newsome. All 3 guys on rookie deals. All 3 guys serviceable enough to play. All 3 guys did their role fine. That's development right there. Hey, man, Jack Conklin, your all-pro right tackle, goes out for the year. We ain't thought about him all season. Why? Because DeJuan Jones stepped right in. Hell, DeJuan Jones went out. We ain't really talking about the fact that James Hudson was in there last week. We haven't even talked about Garyon Christian, the guy we got from off the street that's been stepping in playing left tackle for us fine. Talent development, man. Talent development. Hey, this Browns team, since they traded for Watson especially, but even before they traded for Watson, if you just look at Andrew Berry's pick history, he has not had the same fortune and luxury of draft pick that guys like Ray Farmer had, that guys like John Dorsey had. He has not had that luxury. He's had 1 top 10 pick and 1 other 1st round pick, but yet he's gotten more talent out the draft than a lot of these other GMs. And you know why that is? It's not because Andrew Berry's some genius that knows the answers to every draft quiz and is going to magically pick the right prospect. That's not why. The reason the Browns are hitting on more draft picks despite picking later in the draft than they've ever have is the same reason that kept happening in Baltimore. It's the same reason that kept happening in Pittsburgh, in Cincinnati, despite those guys always having less and worse draft picks than the Cleveland Browns. Browns couldn't develop a talent to save their lives. Those other 3 teams kept developing young talent despite having worse picks than us. Why was that? Because those 3 organizations had good structure. They had a plan for every player that they drafted. And they knew that that player was going to be able to go through that plan. There was no, hey, you might be here doing this for 2 years and then we're going to switch to a 3-4 because we're going to fire everybody in the next year, or we're going to be running this offensive concept and then we're going to fire everybody and then we're going to go to a West Coast and then we're going to fire everybody and go to a spread. There's no way you could develop somebody like that because there's no roadmap like that. The Browns are much better at developing talent because they could just have a roadmap. They've been running the same offense for 4 years. They've been running similar defenses to what they're running now. It's a more aggressive version of it, but it's still 4-2-5 base. They've been running that for years. Not much has changed. The approach might be a little different between Jim Schwartz. Not a little. The approach might be different between Jim Schwartz and Joe Woods, but the positions are the same. You're not switching to a 3-4. You're just same defense, just different approach. And you get more out of guys. Jordan Elliott's a great example of this. You got more out of him. Alex Wright's another one. Stability breeds development. Development breeds talent. Talent breeds accumulation. And accumulation breeds retention. See how it all kind of goes in there? When the Browns have a hole on the roster, they fix it. Offensive line's a little stinky. Okay, we're going to go all in on offensive line 2020. 2021, what was the big problem? Okay, we got some issues with some defensive pieces. We're going to get some defensive pieces. The defense was fine in 2021. Okay, the defense was fine in 2021, but we just didn't have a great offense. We're going to trade for Amari Cooper. The offense was good in 2022. The defense went to the crapper. Okay, we're going to fix the defense. Boom. If there's a problem with the quarterback going forward, I promise you they'll fix it. They're in a better position to fix it. If there's an organization that can draft the quarterback that's been running the Browns, it's this one. But we'll get to that in a minute. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Now, I know the big thing that everybody wants to talk about, Quincy, this is all nice and stuff, but you got to talk about that Deshaun Watson trade. And while everybody has wanted to make their definitive resolution on a trade that involves a player on a 5-year contract, let's just assume the trade, it doesn't work out. Let's assume the trade is bad. This is where I say you got to be able to withstand some hits. Now, I don't think the books completely closed on that trade working out. I mean, we kind of did a similar thing to Russell Wilson last year. And look how Russ has done this year, right? Like, there's time for it to turn around. Deshaun's significantly younger than Russ. There's no reason it couldn't turn around. I think we're too quick to write things off if it doesn't look amazing. And let's not forget, Deshaun's injury wasn't a muscle tissue injury. It was a bone injury. That should be able to heal. And he was looking better the last few times he played. He actually had 3 good games the last few times he played. So I don't think the book's necessarily closed on that one, but let's assume it is. Oh, does that just ruin everything else I talked about? No, it doesn't. Because one, a bad trade, a bad decision doesn't really define an organization. An organization isn't defined by whether every trade they make is good. It's about your ability to withstand the blow of a decision going wrong. Case in point, everybody watching this video, everybody watching this clip, everybody watching whatever, everybody who sees this will say that the San Francisco 49ers are a good organization. They are a top flight organization, right? Everybody would agree with that, right? They got Brock Purdy in the 7th round. Like they're a top tier organization. No, not a controversial statement. Been one of the best teams in football for a while. Everybody would also agree if I said Kyle Shanahan is a top tier NFL head coach. Nobody's disagreeing. I don't think anybody's disagreeing with me there, right? Not controversial statements. Are they defined by the fact that they spent 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance, who's probably never going to play meaningful football again? No, they're not defined by that. The reason the 49ers aren't defined and at this point barely criticized about that is because the 49ers, in spite of that not working out, have won football games. Is not true. Sounds true to me, right? That's the excuse everybody says. Doesn't really matter. They win football games. They're a good organization. They can withstand that blow. Let's assume the Deshaun Watson trade does not work out. Again, I think there's reason to believe that that can easily right itself correctly next year. But let's live in that world. Does it matter? The Browns have found ways to win games. They're 8-5 right now. I mean, if Baltimore weren't running away with the division with 10 wins and with the 1 seed, Browns might have a shot at winning the division. Does it really matter? See, a bad trade doesn't define you. A bad choice doesn't define you. You know what defines you? Your record. Here's something interesting. Kevin Stefanski, in 4 years as the Cleveland Browns head coach, you want to know what his record is? Kevin Stefanski has a record of 34-29. Now, again, his last year is not finished yet, but he already has 34 wins as a NFL head coach, 29 losses, a win percentage of .540. Interestingly enough, Kyle Shanahan's first 4 years as an NFL head coach, you want to know what his record was? 29-35. Now that's counting 4 full seasons. Kevin already has more wins in 4 seasons than Kyle Shanahan did when he started with the 49ers. It's interesting. Kyle Shanahan was also under 500, but then you could point to, hey, Quincy, that's not fair. The reason Kyle Shanahan was under 500 in his first 4 years because he dealt with injuries. Injuries ruined his season. He got a quarterback injured. 1 year, his whole offense got injured. You can't hold that record against Kyle Shanahan. I would say with most coaches, that would be true, man. That would absolutely be true. 2017, Jimmy Garoppolo went down. That completely tanked their season. 2018, I believe that was the year that everybody got hurt. Like the whole team got hurt. And I believe 2020, everybody got hurt again. But then you look at Kevin Stefanski and you ask yourself, okay, 2020, nobody got hurt for Kevin. 2021, Baker went down. Now, when Jimmy went down with the 49ers won 6 games. That was a fine result. When Baker Mayfield's labrum kept popping in and out of his body and he was playing the game with a brace, Browns won 8. Interesting. 2022, again, another season where the Browns look like they're going to be ready to roll. They got a great roster. You get hit with 11-game suspension because you traded for a quarterback who was going to get suspended 11 games for violating the sexual misconduct policy of the NFL. For being accused by, 20-something different women? So you got to carry that burden. You're not going to have your starting quarterback for 11 games. You win 7 games, right? That happened to Kyle. Kyle won like 4 games. 4 or 6. So, circumstances considered, you're doing better. And then this year, man, it's finally going to happen. We ain't got no suspension to worry about. We're going to start rolling downhill. We're going to be great. This is going to be our year, 2023. Nick Chubb goes down 5 quarters into the season. Deshaun Watson goes down halfway through the season. And that's not even everybody, right? The Browns got like 5 starters left. Not even 5, right? They got Wyatt Teller, Joe Bitonio, David Njoku, Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper. They got 5 left. The Browns have 5 starters left that they started camp with. Everybody else is injured. And Amari Cooper's still on the injury report. He week to week. That's just the offensive injuries. Decimated with injuries. Similar to how the 2020 49ers were decimated with injuries. Kyle Shanahan, a great coach, pushed this team to 6 wins. Browns are 8-5. We started 4 quarterbacks. Now, Kyle Shanahan gets a lot of credit for good reasons. He's done a lot with little. But let me tell you something. Has he beaten 4 teams that are over 500 with 4 different quarterbacks? The Browns have beaten 4. Well, the Browns have with 4 quarterbacks beaten 6 or 7 teams over 500. Deshaun Watson beat the Cincinnati Bengals, who are over 500 right now. They beat the Baltimore Ravens, who are the 1 seed currently right now in the AFC with Deshaun Watson. So that's 2 over 500 wins with him. The Browns with PJ Walker have 2 over 500 wins. Indy, he didn't technically start, but he played most of that game. So Indy in San Francisco, ironically enough, PJ Walker won that game. Then you go to DTR. He beat an over 500 Steelers team. And then Joe Flacco beat an over 500 Jacksonville Jaguars team. There is no team that is withstanding the attrition of an NFL season like the Cleveland Browns. And it's not because the Cleveland Browns are magical. It's because the Cleveland Browns are well ran. They're a well ran organization. And let me tell you something. This well ran organization doesn't just stop here. Because when you talk about the future, right? That's where everybody's going to point to, right? Well, you got that Deshaun Watson contract, Quincy, and the future just ain't going to look good. It's not the doom and gloom story you think. You can head and check out my guy, Jack Duffin, on Twitter. He has the most up-to-date stuff when it comes to the Browns salary cap. And the truth about the Deshaun Watson contract is you can move a lot of money around. You can use some of the cash in it to get rid of cash that's on the cap. And you can adjust it around. Is it going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt? Yes. But what quarterback contract isn't? But when you look at the Browns' future, if you're a Browns fan, 2025 is an interesting year. because I think regardless of how Deshaun Watson's playing, Deshaun Watson could be playing bad, mid, or off the charts. Deshaun Watson could be in the MVP conversation. 2025, wouldn't be surprised if the Browns decide to follow that Green Bay, Philadelphia model, where they draft the next guy while they still got the starting guy going. And they're going to keep this train going on and on. Because if there's one thing about Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, they're always putting the Browns in a position to upgrade at positions of need. When it's offensive line, they upgraded at offensive line. We saw it. When they needed to upgrade a wide receiver, they shipped out Jarvis Landry. They got rid of Odell Beckham. They brought in new guys and boom, they upgraded. When it was quarterback, they got rid of Baker Mayfield, brought in Deshaun Watson. If they decide that Deshaun Watson's not enough, they will upgrade. This is who the Cleveland Browns are. They're a well-oiled machine. They're a well-ran football team. That's why I think the Cleveland Browns are a good organization. And they've quietly been that for a little while. The perception of the Deshaun Watson trade outside of Cleveland and the brand name of the Cleveland Browns outside of Cleveland, I think has clouded people from that. To everybody else, we're the same old Browns, but to those watching closely, to those in the know, they know that not to be true. And this year feels like this organization's coming out party. Thank you for watching. I appreciate everybody. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.